Hi, I'm Jen with PepperHarrow, and today we're going to be talking about Dahlia care instructions. We've started to ship out all of our Dahlias all across the United States, so now we want to tell you when you receive your Dahlias, what do you do with them? And even if you didn't buy PepperHarrow Dahlia tubers, this is a great reference for any of you out there who are actively receiving your Dahlia tubers and need a little bit of guidance. So the first thing I'm going to do when I get my Dahlias is I'm going to open my package, and I'm gonna take a look at the Dahlia tubers. For PepperHarrow, this is one of our requirements. We want to make sure that you open them up and you take a look and make sure you have the accurate count on the Dahlia tubers you ordered. And we want to make sure that you're satisfied with the state they're in, that you see an eye and that they're going to actively grow for you. So the first thing I'm going to do when I open up my Dahlia tubers is pop them out. There's 2 in here. I'll pop them out and take a real quick look at them. And this happens to be Sweet Natalie. So I'm going to take a look. I see an eye on Sweet Natalie here, and I will take a little zoom shot and show you a little bit closer what the eyes actually look like, so that you can kind of take a look at yours and look for your eyes on your Dahlia tubers. And then the other guy, there's actually a little eye here that I see. All of our Dahlia tubers that we ship out, all of them are guaranteed to have an eye, which means they're guaranteed to grow. These should be ready to grow, if not already. By the time we get ready to ship these, usually they have a lot of growth already out and you can see it. That means they're good, healthy tubers, nice and solid, not squishy, not wrinkled. They're really great and looking really wonderful. So these are really 2 great tubers that we have here. There's 2 more in here. I'm going to just double check. The general rule of thumb is never walk away from something without labeling it. So I'm just going to write real quickly on my little sheet of white paper what this is. Sweet Nat. If I walk away from this, sometimes I don't remember which Dahlia tubers are which. So I put my 2 Sweet Nat there and I labeled it. This is actually Cafe au Lait. There's a couple in here. And I'm going to go ahead and take those out too. There's 2, so I'm going to take both of those out. And this is a perfect Cafe au Lait tuber. And I already see that there's an eye. Okay, my second plump little Cafe au Lait is in here too. And so I have both of those. I'm going to put them back in here. So that's the big thing. If you get these Dahlia tubers and you're still another month or maybe longer before your last frost date, you're going to want to keep them in their little wood shavings here. Keep them nice and secure in their wood shavings. Keep them in their little baggies. I usually let it crack just a little tiny bit, but you're going to want to keep your Dahlia tubers kept in a nice dark area that is between 40 and 50 degrees, so a little bit cooler. Out of direct sunlight. Just know the refrigerator will make them rot out, so you don't want to keep them in the refrigerator. But if you have a spot 40 to 50 degrees, that's absolutely perfect. The other thing you can do when you get your Dahlia tubers, if you choose, is you can pot them up. And I like to pot my Dahlia tubers up in 4-inch pots, and that's what this is. So you'll put a little bit, not regular soil. I usually put a seed starting soil in here, because it's lighter and fluffier and your risk of your Dahlia tubers going bad lessens. If you use regular soil or manure or anything like that, it gets a little bit heavy, holds too much moisture, and the Dahlia tubers don't like that. So I'll usually put my seed starting soil in here, and then I'll pop my Dahlia tuber in. I don't bury it all the way. I'll actually leave the head up and have it poking out so that I can see it start to do its thing. You can take cuttings off of them, or you can just pot them up and get them started a little bit early. And you can certainly put a couple tubers in each pot. And if you want to really push it, you could put 4 tubers in each pot. I like to give them just a little bit more room, so maybe a max of 2, but you can do more if you choose. So pot them up. And if you don't pot them up, like I said, just store them off to the side and keep them at that temperature, and that will help. If you do pot your Dahlia tubers up and stick them in pots, just make sure that you do not overwater them. Water them every other day, and just make sure that you're not soaking them. That'll make sure they stay nice and healthy and don't end up rotting out on you. Once you've made it to your frost date and you're ready to plant your dahlia tubers, we recommend picking a spot that is in direct sunlight, and it can take a little bit of shade. We just recommend that they at least get 6 hours of direct sunshine, okay? But the more sunshine they can get, the better. Dahlias really thrive in really warm, direct sunlight conditions. So if you have that, it's a great spot. If you have a little bit of a spot that's on the shadier side, just know they may not be as prolific as what they would be in a direct sunlight location. The other thing to keep in mind before you plant it is just to make sure it's in a location that does not hold a lot of water. The tuber does not like to rest in water. Your risk of them rotting out is really, really significant if you plant them in a spot where they could be kept in constant moisture. So keep that in mind. And then dahlias do really well from a nice soil amendment. Here at PepperHarrow, we do a 10-10-10 fertilizer. So just a generic fertilizer, slow release. We amend it into our soil before we actually get them planted into the ground. The other thing to do is when you get ready to plant, we usually dig like a 6-inch hole. We usually lay them out in a row. We plant our dahlia tubers 12 inches apart, but for the home gardener, we highly recommend 18 to 24 inches just to give it extra room to be able to grow. It's up to you how closely you want to plant and maintain your dahlia tubers. We like to plant ours very close together because they help support each other, and the stems grow a lot taller. We're a cut flower production farm, and that's what we want. So if that's what you want to, plant them close together. All right, the other thing to keep in mind is when you plant them 6 inches down into the soil. And I usually plant them on their side like what you see here. So I'll plant them 6 inches down, laying on their side right like that. They say that you should look to keep the eye pointed towards the top, but honestly, I don't look at that. You should know most of the plants that you plant, they're naturally geared by Mother Nature to grow up towards the sun anyway, so they're gonna find their way up. So I don't actually look at my dahlia tuber, I just lay it on its side 6 inches into the ground and it does its thing. The other thing to keep in mind is you are not going to want to plant your dahlia tubers until all danger of frost has passed. And with dahlia tubers specifically, we usually plant ours out a month after our last frost date. And we do that because dahlias actually like warmer soil. After last frost here in central Iowa, it's still pretty cold and the soil is still a little bit damp and a little bit cold for them. So usually we hold off a little bit, we wait for the soil to warm up, and they always seem like they do a little bit better. You can do what you want, but at least wait until that last frost date before you plant them into the ground. Once they're planted, every gardener thinks that they need to go water their dahlia tubers in. That's not the case unless it's absolutely bone dry and you're in a drought where you happen to be. Dahlia tubers do not require a lot of water right up front. The only time you really need to start watering your dahlia tubers is when your growth gets at least 6 to 12 inches tall. That's when you start to water your tubers on a routine basis. And really, only if it's extremely dry out. They typically do pretty well on their own without a ton of watering. The other thing we do with our dahlia tubers is once our growth has hit 6 to 12 inches tall, we make a deep cut on the stem, and we usually wait to do that deep cut until we look at the radar and we're like, is it gonna rain? Is it not gonna rain? We wait to do that deep cut after a rain. If you see a rain coming, don't make that deep cut because water will actually get in the stem and rot your dahlia tuber out. So make your deep cut when it's nice and dry and you're not expecting any rain, but that deep cut will help promote branching and give your plant a lot more stability and a lot more ability to be able to grow tall and not kind of keel over. But don't worry, if you're growing your dahlia tubers and you haven't put a stake in to hold it into place to give it any kind of support, we make deep cuts in our dahlia foliage to make sure that it promotes more branching to give it more stability to grow up. So keep that in mind as you're growing your dahlia tubers. Do stake your dahlias if you can. If you can't or are in a place where it's just not accessible to you and your plant falls down, just chop your plant and it will send out more shoots and grow upwards immediately. But that's the way to course correct if it does fall down. Just chop a lot of that greenery off and it will rebound and start growing back up again. To keep your dahlias blooming all season long, just make sure you're deadheading. The more you deadhead those dahlias, the more they're going to flower and bloom for you. We've talked to a lot of people who have actually had issues with no blooms, and generally what the issue is with that is over-fertilization. Weed control is another thing that we do. We just make sure that we weed our dahlias and we have it on a nice consistent weeding schedule. So for us on the farm, we weed our dahlias out by hand, and we tend to do that every 2 weeks. It's best to get it on a schedule. If you let it go, sometimes it can get too late and it's hard to get those weeds out of there. So a nice consistent schedule for your weeding, that'll help make sure that you have great success. The other thing people ask us a lot about is pest control. How do you control all of the bugs from staying away from your dahlia blooms? And you've all probably seen a couple ways that we do that. Occasionally, if I have something I absolutely need, I'll tuck an organza bag and close the bottom to keep the blooms pristine. But most often what we do here on the farm to keep pests at bay is we spray neem oil. And neem oil is a little bit more expensive than a lot of the other insecticides you can get. We like to incorporate a lot of organic growing practices here, and that the same thing applies with our pest management. We apply neem oil every 2 weeks, and it's best also to keep that on a regular schedule, just like the weeding. The more you're on top of it, the more you're going to prevent those pests from eating your blooms. The other thing just to keep in mind is we do spray our neem oil in the evening after the bees have gone to bed and the butterflies too. We try not to hit any of our beneficial insects with any of the neem that we're putting down to control the other bad pests. There are a couple things that we don't do with our dahlias here on the farm, and we want to call those out. These are no-nos. Don't do this. Don't plant your dahlia tubers in that black landscape fabric. We do use that here on the farm to help provide a weed barrier, but for our dahlia tubers, we actually straw mulch them in with straw mulch. That is the best way that we've seen they like. The straw helps keep moisture in, it helps to keep the weeds down, and they absolutely love it. So do not plant them in a tiny little landscape fabric hole or under landscaping fabric. The landscape fabric will attract moisture, it attracts slugs, all of the things that are not good for your dahlia tubers. And then the other thing we don't do that we see a lot is the Horton Nova netting. If any of you have seen people net their dahlias in, it can be done. We just do not recommend it at all. Dahlias get really big and bushy, and sometimes that netting can get all tangled up and it can be hard to harvest your blooms. So those are the two things we say, cut those out and don't use those for the best dahlia growing success you can have. I hope you all enjoyed today's video about dahlia growing tips and tricks and care instructions. Good luck to you in growing dahlias, and as always, thanks for joining and happy growing.